Hi, everybody. I wanted to check in today and do a quick book chat on the most recent book that I finished. It is called The Dragons of Heaven by Alyc Helms. There's the cover. I read this electronically as I usually do. We've got a glare, as we often do as well. See if I can get that better. Got weird lighting in here today. Anyway, is that good? Okay. Yeah, The Dragons of Heaven by Alyc Helms. Um, I heard about this author, Alyc Helms, last year because I went on a search for, to learn a little bit more about an author, the author Barrett Steinmetz, because I had just read his book at the time called Flex. And I went to YouTube and I ended up finding this panel discussion with Angry Robot Books that was held by Angry Robot Books, who also published The Dragons of Heaven. And Alyc Helms was on this panel. That was a discussion about contemporary fantasy. And so, she just, after hearing her talk, it just struck me that I liked what she had to say on that panel. And I thought, okay, I will add her book to my TBR. So I'm just now getting around to reading it, and I'm really glad that I did. I had a lot of fun reading it. It is basically, it's a contemporary urban fantasy, so it's set in a world that we basically know and recognize. The world, except this particular world has superheroes. So superheroes are a part and parcel of life in this world. And her grandfather, the main character's name is Missy Mitchell, and Missy Masters, I'm sorry. And her grandfather had been a superhero called Mr. Mystic, and he has sort of left the scene. And so after a number of years, she has inherited his, superhero powers. And so she takes over his persona of Mr. Mystic, and her superpower and her grandfather's superpower was basically able to manipulate shadow and control shadow. Well, not really control them, but manipulate them. And she also has the ability to go into, the shadow realm, it's called, which is a realm that's, it's a reality that's right beside our own, but it's a shadow reality, and there's lots of nasties that lurk in the shadow realm. So anyway, she ultimately goes to China because her grandfather had honed his powers there. So she goes to China to try to do the same. And in the meantime, she gets mixed up with the 9 guardians of creation, which are these dragon beings that sort of, I guess, guard mankind. They're called guardians, but the guardians actually have they're all siblings and they're immortal, and there's differing opinions on how to deal with humanity, and that's where our story that's where our conflict begins. So Missy sort of gets involved with that on a pretty intimate level and just on a save the world kind of level. So that's sort of the gist of the story, without giving spoilers away. But what I took away from it, so most of the book actually takes place either in China or in and around Chinatowns, specifically the Chinatowns of San Francisco and Oakland, which is where Missy Masters lives. And through the course of the book, we are introduced not only to the 9 guardians, who she spends quite a bit of time with them, but also other beings and such from Chinese mythology and folklore. Like, for example, the guardians of the city. The cities all have their own guardians, like the Chinatowns. And other kind of folk beings like the Huxian. Huxian, I hope I'm pronouncing that somewhat correctly. It's kind of like a kitsune in Japanese. It's a fox spirit. So actually, as coincidence has it, I actually have a T-shirt of a That's actually a kitsune, so thought I'd wear that for the chat today. So that's one of the characters. And then there's other characters, including one from the Shadow Realm itself, who helps her. I really enjoyed that part of the story. I think this interaction between the sort of the superpowers of Chinese culture, the superpowers of these ancient beings. They're super beings in a way, and that sort of combined with our idea of superheroes really made a nice. It really made a nice little duality there, where we had this kind of pulp fiction feel and vibe to part of the book, and then we have this mythological sort of other mythological folklore kind of aspect to it on the other side of it. So it was a real nice, and I think that the author did a really good job of balancing these two forces. The book is written in kind of a, Missy Masters, the main character of the book. She speaks in sort of this one of the urban vernaculars that's common today, which is peppered with a lot of pop culture references, and kind of snarky and sarcastic, and so that might have been a little overdone, for my opinion, because I was actually more interested in, the Chinese mythology and folklore aspect of the story. But different readers would experience it differently. I thought it was a nice, like I said, the sort of serious, ancient, timeless beings on this side, and then sort of the superheroes, Missy Masters type, pop culture, pulp fiction kind of world, people on the other side. I think that sort of vernacular really worked in this case. But it was, to me, it was right on the edge of starting to be like, no, don't do Ghostbusters. But it was, for the most part, it was not. I thought it fit really well. So then this whole other idea of the 9 guardians of creation, the 9 guardians, and this sort of disagreement on how best to deal with humans. I don't want to talk about that too much because I don't want to give it away as a spoiler. But I thought that really worked well, and it really gave me something to chew on intellectually and think about there when on that topic. That the hero Missy Masters actually ultimately has to make a choice, and that was all part of that. And I really thought that worked really well, and that was kind of surprised me, and so I got a lot from that. But I don't want to say much more about that because, like I said, I think it would be really easy to give away a central plot idea that I don't really want to do on this video. So, the other ideas, I just really liked being exposed to Chinese mythology and Chinese culture to the degree that I was in this book, because I don't think in a lot of Western fiction we get that a lot, and so to me that felt really fresh and it felt really new. This idea of guanxi, I think it's pronounced, it's an idea of connections and network and connections to get things done, and I really enjoyed exploring that concept and what that meant to the 9 guardians and the other sort of mythological beings of China, as opposed to the American Missy Masters, her idea of connection and network, which was sort of different. And so I thought that was kind of cool and interesting too. And I really liked the way in general that the author, that Alyc Helms, writes. She used the word twee at one point, which means overly quaint. I had to look that up. I read this electronically, so I had my dictionary right handy. So that was kind of good, because she uses words like this that I didn't normally hear or read in fantasy books, and so I enjoyed that. I'm going to try to incorporate the word twee into my vocabulary. I did look up look up a bit about her, and I did see on YouTube that she is she goes to Dickinson fairs, which makes me even like her even more. I'm not much of a costume role play type person, but I kind of like it when kind of enjoy seeing it as a spectator. So overall, I have just discovered that she has the second book in this series has been released just recently, like within the last month. So by Angry Robot books, and is available now. So I probably will ultimately read that. I don't think I'm going to follow and read it immediately now. I'm going to stick with my current TBR. I am only about 6 books left on my reading TBR for 2016 that were my must-reads. So I'm going to get through those 6 books, and then I'll have some wildcard books to play with for the last 2 or 3 months for the end of the year. And I might, maybe, but I definitely probably will eventually. If not on this year's list, then maybe next year's. So I think I'll leave it at that. I did enjoy it. It was not only fun, but I think there was a lot. I was going into the book expecting it just to be sort of this pulpy kind of fun book to read, and it was. But there was more to it than I had expected, and that was a pleasant surprise. So anyway, there will be a new video coming up for books anyway when I finish my next one, which should be soon. So stay tuned for that. Take care. Bye.